It's another day that ends in Y, and Jerry Jones is in the news again. Katie Caldwell and Jeff Lloyd back here with you. Jeff, let's get into some of the comments by the longtime Cowboys owner. He was at a documentary premiere event, and he was asked about the Cowboys' impact on pop culture in the time he's been the owner. Buckle up, this was his answer. If we're not being looked at, I'll do my part to get us looked at. The Cowboys are a soap opera 365 days a year. When it gets slow, I'll stir it up. There's sizzle, there's emotion, and if you will, there's controversy. That controversy is good stuff in terms of keeping and having people's attention. Jeff, I'm not even a Cowboys fan, and I was frustrated as hell reading this. The Cowboys haven't been to an NFC championship game in what? 30 years? What is your reaction to these comments from Jerry Jones?
The thing is, and it's funny just to say, I'll get the Dallas Cowboys back in the news. Why are the Dallas Cowboys not back in the news? I mean, this is, one of the most talked about franchises for being unsuccessful as long as they have. I mean, varying degrees of success, but I mean, you go back to that 90s run, of course, where they were just an absolute dominant unit. And even during those times, what ultimately led from Jimmy Johnson leaving Jerry Jones. And basically, it was because Jerry Jones couldn't fathom the fact that the players were being talked about more, the coaching staff was being talked about more. Jerry Jones, though, it was always like, well, he had this foolish belief. Yes, his money did a lot of things for that organization, but those players still had to play, those coaches still had to coach, and it
Mhm.
always seemed that Jerry felt like he was, on the outside looking in. Which, at the end of the day, I don't get why. The franchise was an investment. You look at what the Dallas Cowboys are worth as opposed to what Jerry Jones has put into that franchise. As far as an investment, that was a win, a major, major
Mhm.
win. I've never seen, you know, we've seen owners certainly put themselves kind of to the front of the line. I don't think we've ever seen anybody do it to the level or the
Not even
length
close.
that Jerry Jones is
Nope.
certainly doing what he's doing. And it certainly, for me, has to come a point within the rest of the Dallas Cowboys organization where, the conversations need to be, this has got to stop. And it's probably to the point where it's absolutely doing 10 times more harm to the organization than it is doing any help. You have a quarterback that's making a large amount of money. So this is certainly a window that the Dallas Cowboys feel they have. You have one of the
Mhm.
best wide receivers in the game. Whatever is going on as far as trying to satisfy one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL, these are the conversations that should be being had in regards to the Dallas Cowboys. But yet, here we are talking about a man at his age who probably has no idea what trending means, continuously trying to have the Dallas Cowboys be trending.
Yeah.
It's definitely, just draws some laughs. But then I also think it kind of gets to the level of, it can't be stopped because who in that organization is going to get him to actually stop?
Exactly. Well, when you bring up the Micah Parsons situation, we've talked about this on the show before. This is what everyone's talking about. It makes zero sense to me that this wouldn't have been a top priority for them. I also look retroactively at contract situations like how they've dealt with like Zach Martin, Dak Prescott. There's been so many situations I look back at now through this lens of just wanting to stir controversy. Does hearing this from Jerry Jones give us more context as to why they've had so many messy contract situations?
I think I would say the shine is off the star. You know what I'm saying? Everything you associate with that organization is obviously the star. That's what everybody thinks
Yeah.
about. But I don't think it carries the same weight that it has. Certainly,
Mm.
not being the success that they were in the 90s has something to do with it. I think also a lot of it has to do is, if I'm a player and I'm, in free agency and, my agent says, well, the Dallas Cowboys, well, if they can't take care of Micah Parsons, what in the world do they think of me, who's just, maybe a general run of mill player? I might be,
Yeah.
a starting corner. I could be, I don't believe that that is a team that, if you can't work in great faith or the best of faith with the absolute stars of the game. I think that certainly would have, other players looking at that franchise, certainly not in the light that I think Jerry Jones thinks that players look at that franchise. I would probably think there's a lot of people that think he comes off just looking, silly, senile with his actions and his behavior. I mean, like again, I mean, we're talking, well, oh, I will always keep my name. I will find a way to keep us relevant. I will kind of, but it's like, well, that shouldn't be the case. You know,
No, it
the
shouldn't.
product, the product, the team itself should be the reason that people talk about the Dallas Cowboys. And again, they are not, an organization as far as popularity and being talked about that is on life support in any means whatsoever. So I
Mhm.
think that's also kind of what comes with the foolishness kind of the statement is, because anybody who's a Dallas Cowboy fan will not stop talking about the fact that they're a Dallas Cowboy fan. Nothing is, tarnished. But I just think basically the brightness and the shine of that Dallas Cowboy star is certainly not nearly what it used to be. And I think most people believe it. But unfortunately, the one who doesn't believe it is the one who does need to believe it. And that is Jerry Jones.
It feels like yet again he just said the quiet part out loud that winning isn't the priority. I have a question about that. How do you feel if you're Brian Schottenheimer in this situation? If I'm a coach, I don't want controversy. I don't want a soap opera. I want to win games. Imagine that. He had to have known what he signed up for with the Cowboys, with the Jones family. But that can't be nice to hear, especially when you're just about to get your start with the team and he's talking about how he wants it to be a soap opera. If I'm a coach, if I'm the players, I don't want that. I want to win.
Well, I think the first thing that you would think in that line in regards to who the head coach currently is of the Dallas Cowboys, it probably tells you why it's Brian Schottenheimer. I mean, there certainly were large names out there. And again, similar to players who might or might not want to play for this franchise, you know, do I want to go work for that man? And this happened with Jimmy Johnson. Yeah, I remember
Yep.
there were times where, Jerry would kind of walk into team meetings and Jimmy would be like, look, friends or no friends, doors over there. We got work to do. You own this franchise. Be a great owner. Do a fantastic job. And to be fair, the owning of the franchise has never really been an issue for him. It's the fact that he wants to integrate himself and jump into other things that he's probably not qualified for and doesn't necessarily realize he's doing more harm than good. Um, so that's how I think you ended up. And there was that search in Dallas. And all of a sudden, they kind of just promoted within from Brian Schottenheimer because I think with a guy like Brian Schottenheimer, I think they believe that there's probably not enough juice from Brian Schottenheimer where he can kind of say, I need you, yeah, I need you to back off, or I think you're interfering, or, I understand you have the best of intentions, but what you think you're doing is not necessarily working out in the best interest of the team. Um, it just feels that that is how Brian Schottenheimer ended up the coach of this team because they needed somebody basically who was already on payroll and give him the job because I think a lot of people didn't want to come in here and necessarily have to deal with this.